Olmec on the NickyLovenAnkh show. Dr. Clyde Winters has written extensively about the Olmec or She people. Check out his book Atlantis in Mexico, which explains the African origin of the Olmec people. Dr. Winters explained on the Nikki Love and Anka show that the Olmecs were one of the greatest civilizations in the Americas, and that the Olmecs were African people. They were not an indigenous culture. When you read any of the earliest reports in some of the books on the Olmecs, you find that most researchers agree the Olmecs appeared suddenly, and that there are no prior antecedents to Olmec civilization. In the Olmec World Ritual and Rulership, Carolyn Tate on page 65 wrote, Olmec culture, as far as we know, seems to have no antecedents. No material model remains for its monumental constructions and sculptures, and the ritual acts captured in small objects. Mary Pye, writing in Olmec Archaeology in Mesoamerica, makes it clear after the discussion of the pre-Olmec civilizations of the Mokaya tradition that these cultures contributed nothing to the rise of the Olmec culture. Pye wrote, the Mokaya appear to have gradually come under Olmec influence during Shurla times, and to have adopted Olmec ways. We use the term Olmecization to describe the processes whereby independent groups try to become Olmecs, or to become like the Olmecs. Pye makes it clear that it was around 1200 BC that Olmec civilization rose in Mesoamerica. She continues, much of the current debate about the Olmecs concerns the traditional mother cultural view. For us, this is still a primary issue. Our data from the Pacific coast shows that the mother culture idea is still viable in terms of cultural practices. The early Olmecs created the first civilization in Mesoamerica. They had no peers, only contemporaries. Richard A. Dial, in the Olmecs, America's First Civilization, wrote, the identity of these first Olmecs remains a mystery. Some scholars believe they were Mokaya, migrants from the Pacific coast of Chiapas, who brought improved maize strains and incipient social stratification with them. Others propose that Olmec culture evolved among the local indigenous populations without significant external stimulus. I prefer the latter position, but freely admit that we lack sufficient information on the period before 1500 BC to resolve this issue. You can see that quote on page 25. Poole, in Olmec archaeology in early Mesoamerica, argues that continuity exists between the Olmecs and pre-Olmec cultures in Mexico. But Poole admits that this conclusion contrasts sharply with that of excavators at San Lorenzo, who reported dramatic change in ceramic type and argued on this basis for a foreign incursion of Olmecs into Olmen. Again, we see that these researchers are talking about the fact that the Olmec did not originate in Mexico, that the Olmecs had to come from someplace else. And you know what? These researchers are correct. As you can see, the Olmec people appear suddenly in Mexico. These Olmec people came from the Saharan region of Africa. You will find that the boats usually found in the Sahara in Mexico, they have an X on them inside of a box. These Olmec use white and red and black pottery, just like the Africans who formerly lived in the Sahara, who came and settled in the Americas. Many of the jade artifacts that these Africans made in the Sahara are made of a jade called Amazonite or feldspar. They made tools, arrows, knives, and edges. Here we have a jadeite Amazonite tool from Niger. African people, before they came to Mexico, were already quite familiar with jade. They used this jade to make many artifacts. They didn't learn this art in the Americas, they brought it with them. Here you can see Stella's number 67. In Stella number 67, you can see one of the Olmec people on a boat. And if you notice, there's a box with an X inside. We also have a Saharan boat in this picture. And you can also see the same boat with the box and X. The origin of the study of Olmecs began with Leo Viner in Africa and the Discovery of America. Leo Viner was a very important scholar because he determined three things that are the standards for Olmec research. Number one, he noted that the Olmecs had a great influence on the Mayan and Azteca religion. He also noted in a sense that many of the religious terms used by the Maya and Azteca were of Mandi origin. And finally, he looked at the writing on the Tuxtla statuette and he found that it was made by the Mandi people. And in fact, he showed many sites where the Mandi had used this script. In Africa, the Mandi-speaking people wrote the so-called Libico-Berber inscriptions, found between the Fezzan in Libya to Dartachit in Mauritania and the Niger Valley. Mexican traditions recorded by Friar Diego de Landa and the Mayan historian Ixtacatl and Sahagan make it clear that a different race from the Amerindians landed at Penotla on the Gulf Coast and spread through the states of Guerrero and Oaxaca on the Pacific coast. Landa says that there were 12 roads landings at Penotla made to this new race. If you look at the Azapa Stela number 5, you can see many of the Olmecs in the boat. This boat records this transportation of African people to Mexico. In this boat, if you look at it carefully, you'll find that the tree has 12 roots, just like the story recorded in the Mexican tradition. These 12 roots probably represent the 12 migration routes of the Olmec people from Africa to the Americas. The Olmecs introduced writing, pyramid building, and agriculture. The Olmec lived in an empire or federal state. Olmec civilization was multiracial and totally integrated. Archaeologists like Dr. Wiercinski, Marquez, and Irvin Constance have found African skeletons throughout Mexico, especially at former Olmec sites. According to Wiercinski, many of these skeletons were of African people. These African people were described by many different terms. Wiercinski checked his data by using the cranioscopic methods of the Polish Academy. These measurements were then compared to a series of 3 crania sets from Poland, Mongolia, and Uganda to represent the 3 racial categories of mankind. He found, in a sense, that some of these Olmec were what he called Loponoid, the Pacific type, the Bush Equatorial, the Armenian. But all of these types were basically, in a sense, African people. These were not terms that referred to people who were European or Native American. They referred to African people. The foundational MT or maternal DNA lineages for Mexican Indians are lineages A, B, C, and D. The frequencies of these lineages vary among population groups. For example, whereas lineages A, B, and C were present among the Maya at Quintana Roo, Maya at Copan lacked lineages A and B. This supports Carolina Bonita et al.'s view that heterogeneity is a major characteristic of Mexican population. The A haplogroup common to Mexicans is also found among the Mandi-speaking people and some East Indians. Underall et al. In 1996 noted that one Mayan male previously has been shown to have an African Y chromosome. This is very interesting because the Maya language illustrates a Mandi substratum in addition to African genetic markers. Here you can see, in a sense, that many Maya also carry the O blood type. This O blood type represents 90 to 100% of the Amerindians. And if you look at this map, you can see that as much as 70 to 90% of Africans also carry this type of blood. When you look at this article, Genetic Admixture, Relatedness, and Structure Patterns among Mexican Population,